It's a quiet Sunday morning in Des Moines, Iowa, 1982. 12-year-old Johnny Gosch grabs his red wagon and heads out alone on his paper route, just like always. But this time, Johnny never comes home. His wagon is found abandoned, newspapers scattered. His footprint stops suddenly. No witnesses, no clues, just a family in shock, a neighborhood on edge, and a city forever changed. Soon, Johnny's face is everywhere, on lampposts, in newspapers, and for the first time, on the side of a milk carton. Breakfast tables across America are transformed. Parents stare into the eyes of missing children as they pour milk for their own. The message is chilling. If it happened to Johnny, it could happen to anyone. Panic spreads. News anchors sound alarms about stranger danger. Politicians promise action. Experts claim millions of kids are vanishing each year. Suddenly, every parent in America is locking doors, clutching their children tighter, and watching strangers with suspicion. The fear is real, even if the facts are not. Behind the headlines, deeper questions emerge. Why did Johnny disappear? Who took him? And why, despite a nationwide manhunt, did the trail go cold? This isn't just a missing child case, it's the spark that ignited a national panic, reshaped parenting in America, and left behind a legacy of unanswered questions. Was the milk carton program a heroic call, or the start of a moral panic? And what really happened to Johnny Gosch? Stick around, because this story is far darker than anyone ever imagined. The late 1970s and early 1980s were a time of growing fear in America. It started with tragedies that seemed to come out of nowhere. In 1979, 6-year-old Ethan Patz vanished while walking to his school bus in New York City. Just 2 years later, Adam Walsh was abducted from a Florida department store, his fate sending shockwaves through the nation. These weren't isolated events, headlines multiplied. At a 1981 meeting in Louisville, one expert warned, children are being abused, murdered, and forgotten. Public dread only deepened. Each new case intensified the fear. The nightly news didn't just report, they dramatized. Serial killers like Ted Bundy and David Berkowitz were mentioned alongside missing children, blurring the line between fact and narrative. The message was clear. The world outside was dangerous. Parents began to see threats everywhere. The phrase stranger danger entered everyday language, and even a quick trip to the store felt perilous. But behind the panic, the facts told a different story. Experts said 1.5 million kids went missing each year. In reality, only a tiny fraction involved stranger abductions. Most were runaways or taken by a parent during custody disputes. Still, fear overshadowed facts. Even Dr. Benjamin Spock warned that the milk carton campaign might traumatize children. But few listened. There were no support systems in place. When Johnny Gosch disappeared in 1982, police classified him as a runaway and enforced a 72-hour wait before investigating. There were no Amber Alerts, national hotlines, or centralized databases. If a child crossed state lines, tracking them became nearly impossible. So parents took matters into their own hands. By 1984, dairies in Iowa began printing missing kids' faces, like Johnny and Eugene Martin, on milk cartons, hoping someone would recognize them. The idea caught fire. Over 700 dairies joined within months. Soon, those faces appeared on pizza boxes, grocery bags, and church bulletins. It felt like a grassroots revolution in child safety. The panic also reshaped policy. Congress passed child abduction bills. Iowa's Johnny Gosch bill required immediate police response. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was formed in 1984. Later, the Amber Alert system became a global legacy. But a critical question lingered. Would any of this actually bring missing kids home? The search for Johnny Gosch quickly became a waking nightmare for his family. The morning he vanished, his red wagon and stacks of newspapers were found abandoned on a quiet suburban street. Only after a customer called to report missing papers did authorities react. When Noreen Gosch called the police, she said it took nearly an hour for officers to respond, and then they labeled Johnny a runaway. There were no signs of a struggle, no suspect, no urgency. Frustrated, the Gosch family turned to private investigators, including former NYPD detective Jim Rothstein and retired FBI agent Ted Gunderson. They poured their savings into search efforts while law enforcement largely stood back. The case received local coverage at first, then it went national. Johnny's face appeared on TV screens, bulletin boards, and, eventually, on the side of milk cartons. Soon his name became a symbol of fear, of failure, and of parental grief. And his story wasn't unique. Families like the Goshes were popping up all over the country. The parents of Janelle Matthews in Colorado, victims of the Atlanta child murders, ordinary people forced to become activists, organizing their own search parties, press conferences, and vigils. The media seized on their pain, broadcasting it into millions of homes. While it raised awareness, it also fed a national hysteria. If it could happen to them, it could happen to anyone. The milk carton campaign was hailed as groundbreaking, but how effective was it? There were no official statistics, no way to track how many children were recovered through the effort. Investigators offered vague answers. Anecdotes like that of 7-year-old Bonnie Bullock in Colorado, who recognized her own photo and was rescued, were extremely rare. In truth, less than 1% of missing child cases involved non-family abductions. Most of the children on the cartons were never in that category. Still, the image of a missing child staring out from a milk carton gripped the public imagination and ignited a new era of fear-based parenting. Critics slowly began to speak out. Dr. Benjamin Spock argued that exposing children to these images could cause psychological harm. Children were beginning their day not with cartoons or cereal boxes, but with the looming threat of abduction. Comedian Eddie Griffin famously joked that the cartons were filled with cute white faces, pointing out the glaring racial bias. And he wasn't wrong. By the late 1990s, Black children made up 42% of stranger abduction cases. Yet most missing kids of color were labeled as runaways and rarely made the news, let alone a milk carton. The system wasn't just flawed, it was skewed. The societal impact was massive. Schools tightened security. Parents began fingerprinting their children. Latchkey kids, once common, were now under strict surveillance. The idea of free-range childhood started to vanish. As one cultural critic put it, the only way to keep your child safe was to keep them home. Television and newspapers continued to amplify the fear. John Walsh, after the loss of his son Adam, turned his grief into action with the launch of America's Most Wanted. The show blended real crime solving with emotional storytelling, becoming a major force in the missing child movement. Meanwhile, tabloids began running increasingly bizarre stories about Johnny Gosch. Noreen's claims that her son had been kidnapped into a child trafficking ring, possibly tied to government corruption, caught media attention. They were never substantiated, but the speculation wouldn't go away. Behind the scenes, however, something quieter, but far more important, was happening. The milk carton campaign had inspired the creation of national hotlines, interconnected police systems, and early versions of online missing person databases. Even if it didn't bring many kids home, it changed how missing children were handled. Forever. In 1999, the story took its most haunting turn. Nearly 2 decades after Johnny Gosch disappeared, his mother, Noreen, opened her mailbox and found a plain envelope. Inside were grainy photographs showing boys in disturbing, restrained poses. One of them, she insisted, was Johnny. He looked older, but she recognized the eyes. The photos were immediately sent to law enforcement and quickly leaked to the media. News programs ran them on primetime television. Was this proof that Johnny had survived? Was he alive, trapped somewhere in a secret network of abusers? Police couldn't confirm the boy's identity. The images were unsettling, but inconclusive. No one came forward, no matches were found, and yet for the Gosch family, and for a country that hadn't forgotten, hope flickered once more. Then came the next blow. In 1985, years earlier, the Gosches had received a letter from someone claiming to be a guard in a criminal gang. The writer said Johnny was alive, being held, and that more information would be provided for a price. The Gosches paid $11,000, but it was a hoax. The letter had come from a 19-year-old scammer, exploiting their grief for money. And he wasn't the only one. Across the country, con artists preyed on desperate families, promising leads that led nowhere. For those seeking closure, the line between hope and horror had completely blurred. As the years passed, the search for Johnny became entangled with conspiracy theories. Noreen went public with her belief that Johnny had been taken by a hidden criminal organization involved in child exploitation, operating across state lines, and possibly tied to powerful political figures. She found support from fringe voices, including former FBI agent Ted Gunderson, who echoed her suspicions. The theories escalated. Some claimed Johnny had been brainwashed and used in covert government operations. Others believed he had resurfaced as White House reporter Jeff Gannon, a man whose identity and background had been called into question. The resemblance was debated on blogs, radio shows, and cable news. No evidence ever confirmed any of it, but the theories wouldn't die. Law enforcement repeatedly stated there was no proof of trafficking rings, political cover-ups, or secret rescues. Every lead ran cold, every claim hit a dead end. And yet, Johnny remained missing. As John Walsh, now host of America's Most Wanted, said, "No body, no clues, no suspects." The campaign that began with such hope had reached a devastating conclusion. The photo of Johnny Gosch on the milk carton had become a cultural icon, but not a pathway to justice. It was a symbol of a system overwhelmed by fear, a mystery that refused to be solved, and a family still searching in the dark. The aftermath of the milk carton era marked a pivotal shift in how America, and eventually the world, responded to missing children. In the wake of public panic and parental anguish, lawmakers realized that symbolic gestures weren't enough. Congress passed the Missing Children's Assistance Act in 1984, funding hotlines and establishing the first national databases. States began to cooperate more closely, forming rapid response networks across jurisdictions. The biggest breakthrough came in 1996 when Texas introduced the first Amber Alert, named after 9-year-old Amber Hagerman, who was abducted and murdered in Arlington. Unlike milk cartons, Amber Alerts delivered immediate, actionable information to the public via radio, television, highway signs, and later, smartphones. Entire communities could be mobilized within minutes, and unlike the milk carton effort, Amber Alerts got results. By 2024, over 1,200 children in the US have been recovered through the Amber system. It's now used in 45 countries around the world, becoming a global legacy of the lessons and failures of the 1980s. Still, the milk carton campaign remains a flashpoint of debate. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children acknowledges the campaign raised awareness, but admits there's no clear evidence it led to significant recoveries. Its impact wasn't in finding children, it was in changing the conversation. Behind the scenes, the real progress came in law enforcement protocols. The 72-hour waiting period was abolished in many states. Police began sharing data across state lines. Amber Alerts, DNA registries, and coordinated child abduction response teams became standard. The Gosches helped fuel some of that change. Iowa's Johnny Gosch bill required immediate police involvement when a child was reported missing. Their advocacy pushed public officials to act, even if the results came too late for Johnny. Public perception evolved too. By the late 1990s, documentaries and exposés began to reframe the milk carton campaign as part of a broader moral panic. The media, once a source of hysteria, began emphasizing facts and prevention over fear. But the cultural impact remained. The campaign ushered in a new era of parenting, cautious, highly supervised, and risk-averse. Playdates were scheduled, GPS trackers became common, and many children were no longer allowed to walk alone. It was the birth of what some call paranoid parenting, and it all started with a paperboy in Iowa whose face appeared on a milk carton. Decades later, the mysteries of the milk carton era remain unresolved. Johnny Gosch's fate is still unknown. His name lingers on lists of the missing, a symbol of all the children who vanished without a trace, and the families left behind in silence. Despite allegations of trafficking networks, government conspiracies, and secret rescues, no credible evidence has ever surfaced. As the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children admits, Johnny's case spawned a raft of conspiracy theories, but never closure. Still, the impact of his disappearance is undeniable. The milk carton campaign changed how the world views missing children. It laid the foundation for modern recovery systems, Amber Alerts, centralized databases, digital alerts. Lives have been saved, families have been reunited, and yet, the psychological toll lingers. The campaign didn't just alter law enforcement, it rewired the national psyche. It taught a generation of parents to see danger everywhere, to trade freedom for safety, and to view the outside world through a lens of fear. The monster under the bed became the stranger on the sidewalk. Today, those fears have taken new forms: cyber predators, viral hoaxes, constant media saturation. But the question remains the same. Will we let fear drive our decisions or demand solutions grounded in reality? The faces on those milk cartons may have faded, but the questions they raised still haunt us.